as far as your physical activity levels, there's literally nothing that you can't do unless your doctor specifically notices that there's an issue, right? So the thing is don't worry until somebody tells you to worry. So if you want to jog, if you want to swim, if you go to Pilates, there is no reason why you can't do anything unless there is an issue. As weird as that answer is, but there is no specific limitations just because you're carrying an additional baby.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. This week's reviewer of the week is Heidi Abbey, and she says, I can't recommend enough. Binge listener here, third-time mom prepping for my natural birth, March-April due window, after my first two births didn't quite go as expected. I love the unbiased and extremely informative conversations and have been going back to listen to all the labor prep episodes as baby time nears. I especially like the early episode about what to do when you're sick of being pregnant. Haha. Thanks for all that you do. Yes, you guys, I'm actually going to link that episode here for you in the show notes. So if you are listening and you are sick of being pregnant, I want you to head to that episode because it's going to be awesome for you to listen to right now. Today, you guys, I have with me Natalie Diaz. She is the Pied Piper of twin families around the globe. She's the founder of Twiniversity, which we're going to talk about today, which is the world's leading resource and support network for multiple birth families, which means we are talking about twins today, you guys. Nat's become a global influencer for this small niche community, and Natalie is the world's #1 twin parenting and twin gear expert, serving as a twin consultant for top brands and worldwide recognized foundations. So if you haven't noticed, she's going to be kind of amazing as we get to talking here. She's also a certified lactation counselor and a child passenger safety technician. And as we were just talking before this episode, she's working on her IBCLC. So basically, this is the lady that you want to lean on and listen to when you have any questions about being pregnant with multiples, specifically twins. With that, Natalie, say hello to everybody and welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
You got it. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. It's, we're a small network of birthing folk, right? Birth workers, as we're so generously called. But it's so exciting, and I love what you do. And seriously, you're as amazing of a resource for singletons. But I think twinnies you probably have plenty of twinnie families out there listening right now.
Yes, we do. But that's exactly why I'm excited to have you here, because I know we've gotten some questions over the years. And while I can answer them one-on-one, I love this idea of being able to reach a much wider audience. And so I'm really happy that you're here with me. And I do have a list. So get ready.
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready. That's it. I had my Wheaties. I'm ready to go.
Perfect. The first thing that I think moms are going to wonder, because we don't always know when we're going to be pregnant with twins, right? Like they have no idea. So when a mom does find out she is pregnant with twins, what's the first thing that you tell her to do? Or what would you recommend the very first thing that a mom that finds out she's pregnant with twins does?
The very first thing is start getting used to saying, yes, thank you.
Okay.
That's it. As women, we tend to like say, no, we're good. Everything is fine. We're going to make it. But with a multiple birth pregnancy, you're definitely going to need more support than the average mom. And you're going to have potentially more doctor's visits, potentially, a few more sonograms than average. But you should still expect to have a very typical pregnancy, but get used to saying, yes, thank you, because anybody who's going to offer you support, you should accept it. Honestly, that goes for singleton families too. I think in general, us mama bears, we don't say yes enough. We say, we're good. Don't brush it off. Like, accept the help that you could get. You only have a tiny window where you are like the star of the show, and everybody wants to take care of you and nurture you. And this is your time to say, yes, I will have, that extra sandwich. I will totally have another cup of tea. Sure, you could pick me up 2 cookies. So yeah, so for that, you just get used to saying, yes, thank you. So we don't turn anybody off, and we accept all the help that's possibly thrown our way.
I love that. I know a lot of the moms listening here are listening because they want to do something in regards to their preparation for being ready for their pregnancy. They want to have a really healthy, low risk, like intervention-free pregnancy, which may or may not be a little bit trickier when we're talking about twins, but also into their labor experience and birth. And so the one thing that I love to talk to women about is providers and how important your provider is. So I'm sure that you've had to deal with this personally, and I know that you talk to moms about this, but what does this look like for a mom who is pregnant with twins? And what kind of questions what are the best questions that she can be asking a provider to make sure that you're both on the same page?
So I cannot possibly stress enough how important it is to be an advocate for yourself when it comes to your delivery, whether it's singleton or multiple birth. However, I will tell you that we have done numerous studies at Twiniversity, and we find that unanimously, when moms typically find out that they have a second embryo, another heartbeat, even a third heartbeat in there, they tend to throw their hands up and put all control in the doctor's hands. And this infuriates me, because if we had a singleton birth, a lot of us have plans of what we wanted our birth experience to be like. So we may have been like, I want a water birth. I want to make sure that my partners are there. There's all these things that we wanted. But then once we hear that second heartbeat, we decide that we can't have any of it. Meanwhile, nobody told us we couldn't have any of it. But we have this assumption that this is going to be a lot more medical intervention type of situation, but it's not necessarily. And we have plenty of moms who have, epidural free, fully organic, natural in the water. Like, you can have the delivery that you'd like to have. But before you even go to the doctor, you probably want to have an idea of what type of experience you want. Because if you don't know what you want, it's very hard to assume that your medical provider is going to read your mind, because we still, with all the AI out there, there's still none of that available in our medical offices. So every 6 weeks at Twiniversity, we have a delivery day boot camp. And I probably spend a good 15 minutes talking about advocacy. And I personally know that when I went to my very first kind of prenatal appointment, it was this one doctor, and I hated him. He made me cry, and he led me to believe that because I was having twins, I was going to have a premature delivery. And I left that office hopeless. And so I was supposed to have lunch with somebody that day. And I can remember, honestly, Stephanie, I can't even remember what I had for dinner last night. Right. But yet there is these moments of your life that imprint on your person. And that's it. Birth is it. So for me, I remember that I was crying, and my husband's like, we're never going back there. And I'm like, but I want to deliver at that hospital. That's where I was born, blah, blah, blah. My husband's like, that's cute, but no, we can't have you crying every time we come out of a doctor's appointment. And so then we sat down as a team, and he's like, well, what do you want? And I'm like, I don't know what I want, because the thing is you don't know what you don't know. Right. And that's why classes like yours are so important, because how do I know what questions to ask if I don't even know what choices I have? So in that situation, I remembered that my priority was going to be, I wanted a woman. I wanted a woman to deliver these kids. I needed somebody to really, it's not even empathize. I just wanted somebody with the same equipment as me. And I wanted to know how much I should really be stressing about this. And so I changed practices, which meant I changed hospitals. And the first time I went in, they were like, listen, calm down. The only thing that's different about you versus somebody else is that you have another baby in there. And right now, your reality is everything is perfect and there's nothing to worry about. And I'm like, I'm home. That was it. That was literally the moment. Dr. Barbieri, I just did a recent episode with her on it, because she could still remember my twins delivery with ridiculous clarity. If you want to talk about imprinting, It's imprinted on her as well. And it's so funny because we don't know what's going through our doctors' minds while they're with us. And so for me as a podcaster too, Steph, like you would get it. Like it was fascinating to me to hear what was happening on her side of the desk during my delivery. But I always tell everybody to remember the acronym BRAIN. Do you guys talk about that at all?
Totally.
Ever?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So for you, for the listeners out there, if you're not familiar, it's very typical that we always recommend that we use our brains, right? And it's not just in the birth world. It's actually in the universe. And so what it stands for, if we spell it out, B stands for benefits, R is risks, A is alternatives, I is intuition, and N is nothing. So when you are visiting your doctor for the first time, use your brain. And if the doctor says, hey, listen, you know what? You're having a twin delivery, which means that we're probably going to deliver at 38 weeks via C-section, right? Which is, by the way, super typical. You could just say, okay, well, what are the benefits of that? Like, what are the benefits of having a C-section, right? What are the benefits of, going at 38 weeks versus pushing it and going a little bit further? And then, what are the risks if I don't want to deliver at 38 weeks and I do want to roll the dice and see what Mother Nature has in store for me? And my intuition is telling me, everything is perfect. Or you run down this list, not only at that first doctor's appointment, but for every single time that like the little hairs on the back of your neck go up, it's telling you to use your brain. And it's telling you to ask the questions. So even if it does happen the way that your medical team wants it to happen, at least you felt that that was an informed decision on your end. So always use your brain. And I say from the jump. And we've had moms that have left their doctors and went to a whole different practice at 36, 38 weeks, as crazy as that sounds. We have a podcast episode with a mom who literally did that at 37 weeks, left her entire practice, and she had both babies head down. And they're like, no, we still deliver, via C-section. And she's like, this doesn't make any sense. And it doesn't make any sense. So I'm so proud of her for doing that, because that's scary to do it that far in your pregnancy and go to people that you've, never met before and you're rolling the dice. But she found her forever doctors and had a delicious delivery and everything was perfect. And she's like the freaking gold standard. I mean, seriously, she's unbelievable. So yeah, so it's possible, but always try to use your brain through your first visit, through your last visit. Always keep making sure that you feel comfortable with any decisions that are being made for you.
Yeah, I feel like you are repeating like the story, like this is my story that I'm telling on here all the time, but I think it is so valuable to have somebody else saying it. It's just like mom and dad, right? Mom and dad can tell the kids all day long that this is what you're supposed to do in your life and these are the whys. But when they hear it from their friends' parents or from some mentor of theirs, all of a sudden it clicks. So I feel like you can't get enough of this information. And I love that you're saying all that stuff. In fact, I recorded an episode just last week where I was talking about women that are concerned about changing providers late in pregnancy and why it is so important that you just do the work anyways. Because once you're there, like you said, once you're there, it's like, I'm home. And there's no question like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I stayed with this person for so long because I found what I needed over here. So I think that's huge. With that, I have some questions though, kind of some clarifying. Could you walk me through, because I know some of the answers to these and I don't know some of the answers to these, and I want women to hear. When a mom finds out that she's pregnant with twins, and you kind of talked about this, what's the like basic blanket protocol that providers are going to tell you, which includes cesarean birth at the end of her pregnancy? And then what are other options that moms can have? What does that look like for them?
So it's very important that when you go to that first visit, this is going to sound crazy. Probably not, because you guys are my people, right? And for the record, listeners, like we did not plan this. So anything that I'm saying, if like Stephanie's been saying this for years, like honestly, I did not go and like study every podcast, but this is general good practice for humans, period, the end. So when you go to that office for the first time, I actually think it's really important for the person that's taking your blood pressure and the person that is that first person in the room, just say, hi, I'm so nervous about having twins. Do you guys have a lot of twins in the practice? And so I want to know on the insider front, like I want to know from the nurses and from the PAs and everybody there, how well versed these doctors are, right? And then when the doctor comes in, if they typically will say, right, here's your benchmarks, right? We got to make it to 24 weeks is our first hurdle. Then we want to make it to 30 weeks is our next hurdle. And then we want to get to 34. So you're going to have all these little tiny benchmarks that we need to hit throughout our pregnancy, which is no different than a singleton pregnancy. As your pregnancy progresses, though, they are going to keep a higher eye on you because, unfortunately, there really are things that can happen to us. So twin parents do have higher risks of certain pregnancy issues than other families. We have a significantly higher risk of preeclampsia and postpartum preeclampsia. We also have a higher risk of gestational diabetes. And everything that happens in a singleton birth, we get it, but we have a little bit of a higher chance because our bodies are going through so much. We are at a new level of like hormonal high because we're creating. Think about it. And this sounds so crazy, but when you're pregnant with twins, you have 3 brains. You have 3 hearts. You are doing so much. It is constantly putting your body into overtime. So the doctors are typically going to tell you, okay, this is what's going to happen, up until this point. You're going to have these many visits. Ideally, we'd prefer if you've gained this much, we'd feel comfortable with it. And of course, you guys know that that's a very variable number, but they always want to make sure that you're going to be healthy. And so they might do a ton of blood work in the beginning just to have a baseline of what's happening in your first trimester. And then they could continue watching it, of course, through your entire pregnancy. But they usually do say that in general, doctors really don't like to go past 38 weeks with a multiple birth pregnancy. And I understand. And look, I'm on both sides of the fence, right? Because on one side of the fence, I know the reason why they want that to happen. But at the other side, I'm a mom too, and I know that you want to go as far as you could go. But the danger that kind of occurs is as your babies get bigger in utero, they kind of, if they're really big, honestly, I know it sounds scary, but they could push their umbilical cord up against the side and then stop the flow because there's no room left. And there's so many reasons why this could happen. So it could, I think actually it has a bit to do with people's height, believe it or not. I found totally unofficially that my tinier moms could go further because they have a belly that kind of goes out versus my taller moms that have torso space and the pregnancy kind of goes up. So it's very interesting. And of course, this is my very unscientific methodology that I'm using with just working with twin families for 15 years. But I tend to find that, my tinier mamas who are usually the most worried about how am I going to carry twins, it's all kind of horizontal. Their belly, I call it a tiny beluga belly, where it's very concave kind of at where her ribs would be. And then it pops out. It's so cute. I love it so much. I can't even handle my tiny mamas with their twin pregnancies, but you're always going to have to say 34 weeks is kind of the big stone that you want to hit with any pregnancy, but especially with a multiple birth pregnancy. But if the doctor says hey, we don't go past 38 weeks at this pregnancy, it's going to be entirely up to you whether you want to roll the dice and find a new, place to go, or just say, okay, this is pretty much going to be a universal standard, unfortunately.
Now, when you're saying not going past 38 weeks, is that all inclusive of now it becomes a cesarean birth? Or if you can go into labor by 38 weeks, or are we talking induction? What does that look like?
Yeah. So 38 weeks it could be anything. It certainly does not have to mean a C-section by any means, shape, or form, right? And baby A is the one that holds all the cards. So if baby A is head down, I'm not saying that baby B doesn't matter, but once the tunnel is open, we have a few more choices of what we could do with a baby B, right? You could manually turn a baby just like you could a singleton, because once that first baby is out, it's really just a singleton delivery, if you kind of think about it, right? We only have the one left in there. So for that 38 weeks, it could be an induction because they don't want you going much further. They could also see how much space we have left, but it could be 38.5, 38.6. It doesn't have to be 38 on the head. So, and if you want a specific doctor there on your delivery day, you may say, okay, yeah, it's unfortunate that I have to be induced, but if I do, could I at least be induced on the Wednesday so that, Dr. Barbieri is here that day. So it's there. You still have some wiggle room, but typically you're physically running out of room after 38 weeks.
Okay. And then I have heard different things regarding this, but since you brought it up, you had said, so if baby A, that's the first baby coming out for you guys who are listening,
Mm-hmm.
but if that baby is head down and things look good,
Mm-hmm.
what
Yep.
happens if baby B is not? You talked about some manual manipulation, but do they also do breech delivery? Does it depend on the provider? And what does that look like for mom? I know that most of the times, right, this is done in an operating room in the event that they do need to operate on mom and get baby out quickly. So you talk about that for a moment.
Sure. It's not only because you are guaranteed to like potentially have an operation. Really, the reason why they deliver in an OR is the volume of staff that's needed. Because you need two pediatrician, two potentially two neonatologists. You're going to have one anesthesiologist, but there's a lot of teams. And if you're delivering in a teaching hospital, every freaking Tom, Dick, and Harry is going to be there for your multiple birth. So they tend to put us in the OR only for room. So it's not because they suspect that baby B is going to turn into a C-section. It really just is that, unfortunately, but operating rooms are significantly larger than any birthing room that is out there. However, post-pandemic, we have plenty of mamas that are delivering in their labor and delivery room. Like they're not pushing it. They're not putting us in there so quickly. We've noticed that although it was just a horrible thing that's happened to our country, I've noticed a change in birth practices here in New York City. And so I'm going to say that's awesome. Like, thank you so much for realizing that you were wasting our time all those years. But it's still, especially a teaching hospital, they're going to want us to deliver in there because everybody's going to be there, which, by the way, you have the right to choose only essential hospital employees. So that's something that you need to advocate for yourself for. However, I will say, if you listen to Aunt Nat, have everybody there. The more eyes, the better, the more it's going to help the next person that delivers. And even if you're somebody that is like, I'm nervous about it, you're obviously someone who wants to be prepared, right? And so you believe the person who's listening to this right now, you mama bear that's out there, you're somebody who's like, I want to feel in control. I want to feel prepared. So have as many people in that OR because that's what those doctors are trying to do. They're trying to get all the information so that they can make it easier for the next twin mama bear that comes in. So that was half of your question, right? The OR. Then the second question or the second part to that question was you said, does it really matter for baby A? Yeah, or what's happening with baby B? Well, yes, of course. There is this microscopic chance that you may actually have both on the same day. So you may have an old school delivery and a new school delivery, right? So you could have baby A vaginally and then baby B is like chilling and it just stretches out and is like, I didn't know we had so many bedrooms in this condo and this is great. So yeah, it could potentially be that baby B does not want to descend. However, if there is no rush, why are we rushing? And let's just throw back to 60 years. People did not know that there was another baby in there. You have to realize that it through historically, right? And I'm a big fan of looking at the past because as much as I want to say that medical interventions are necessary in certain situations, and yes, it's wonderful, but when my grandmother delivered, her generation didn't even know they were having twins. And so, like, why are we going to run through walls on fire when you have every previous generation of women that have been in your family since they were cave people? They're right there with you on your delivery day. And they're standing there and they're helping you push and they're getting you through it. And they're like, come on, we got this. I did this. You could do this. Whether it's 1, 2, or 3 babies, it does not matter. You are not the first person to deliver a child. And so everybody is there with you in spirit. And I weirdly, as somebody who had a vaginal delivery unexpectedly, because nobody even told me that was an option, by the way. So I didn't even really think about it. I just assumed I was going to have a C-section. But there's just something that happens with the whole process that you have to trust and you have to believe in yourself and you have to believe in your babies. And that is something that's very difficult. And really, as like a lactation person, nobody wants to believe in their kids anymore. And I'm like, could you just trust me? They're drinking. And they're like, no, they're not. That's not happening. And I'm like, fine, we'll do a weighted feed. They just drank 4 ounces. Like, I told you so. Like, come on, we got to trust these kids. So even these little tiny fetuses that are going to pop out any second, they are still in some kind of control. Like things are going to happen in a really good way. But you do have doctors that are like, absolutely, we do not deliver baby B breech. And then you have doctors that are like, what does it matter that baby B is breech? So ask that question and find out so it's not a surprise. And then if you don't like the answer of that doctor, go to another doctor in that practice or change practices like we said in the beginning.
I love it. Okay. Now I want to take it back. So that was because I'm like,
Sure.
yes, let's get to the labor and all that fun stuff. That's what I always want to talk about. But will you talk about the different kinds of twins? This is a question I know we get a lot. So there's like, they can have a shared placenta, they can have their own placenta, they can have an amniotic set. Will you talk about the different kinds of twins when moms find out they're having twins and what that would look like for them?
Absolutely. Okay, so it's one of our most read articles on Twiniversity. And so in general, there are really, I only can, I'm not saying that there's only two different types of twins, but there are different types of twins. And so you have the potential to have one little eggie that is either popped in or gets fertilized and then that splits. And that is, excuse me, but that would be identical twinnies is one eggie that kind of split. And so there's two different types of pregnancies you could have with that, right? So you could have each of the embryos have their own, and I use very like layman's terms. There are two babies that would each have their own apartment and their own vending machines. Okay, so their own amniotic sac and their own placentas. That would be one type. And even though people would say that traditionally that would be a fraternal pregnancy, that is not always the case. There are identical pregnancies that you could do some DNA testing post-delivery and find out that even though they had their own houses and their own vending machines, they could still be identical. Okay, then you have the type of twinnies that share a house and share a vending machine. This is the most complicated type of pregnancy because they could get twisted in each other's umbilical cords. And there is also the danger of having a disproportionate both nutrition, oxygen, everything of your placenta. And so that would create situations where you would have something called twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, or there's another thing called TAPS, which is all about that one baby basically gets ketchup blood and the other baby gets like water blood. And then you have one baby that's getting all the nutrients and then the other baby who's kind of super duper hungry. So that is definitely the most complicated of the pregnancies and is going to be watched, as closely as possible. And then you have the type of pregnancy where each baby has their own home, but they share a vending machine, right? So it's kind of like, I remember back in high school when we were like working on statistics and you would be like, okay, if this is the yellow team and the blue team, how many different varieties of this could we make, right? So that's what it happens with twinnies. So the easiest pregnancy, which is funny to say, but that would be kind of a die-die. So that means that it's their own home, their own vending machine. That's easy because they're just two separate pregnancies that are occurring at the same time. And that's typically what fraternal twinnies are. And then you have the other types, like I said, which are either modi, meaning that they have one home, two vending machines, or they are momo, meaning that they have one home, one vending machine. That's what we're looking at. So those are the types of twinnies that are there. But there's still a billion things that could happen, just like with any pregnancy. So I specifically had die-die. I have a boy and a girl is my twinnie set. And yes, I do have twinnies. My favorite title of all the titles that I have is my twin mama. But I remember that when I was in labor, I had very, very bad preeclampsia. And I also had HELLP syndrome. So like poop was hitting the fan. It was not looking good for me at any means, shape, or form. And I remember that the doctor kept saying the babies are blissfully unaware. And so even though I was uncomfortable and I was in pain, she always and this is why I knew that I picked the right practice, because she always kept assuring me that everybody's okay. Like you may feel away, but they're doing great. Their heartbeats are great. They're strong. Like you're doing good. And so I just basically we figured out how far we could push it with my body without it giving out and me being able to have a successful delivery. So knock on wood, I'm really unbelievably appreciative to my crazy, crazy team. And they did the right thing. But my delivery was pretty quick. I have to be honest with you. So I was induced and we induced because of my preeclampsia, but within 5 hours, everybody was out. And they did not anticipate that. But Stephanie, I remember that I was in the labor room And I'm like, could somebody check on this? And they're like, no, it's too early. You're a first time mom. There's nothing to worry about. And I'm like, could you just humor me? Could you just take a look under the hood and see what's happening? And the nurse was like, oh, here comes your fiery redhead. And Stephanie, you could see what I look like, right? So hearing that, I'm like, is it the drugs? Like, what is going on? But sure enough, man, I have a fiery redhead that I did not anticipate. Genetics are a crazy thing, but she was out in 2 pushes. And so I delivered at 34 weeks on the day. And as horrible as it is, one of the benefits of a premature delivery is it's kind of like a slip and slide. So you could sneeze and everybody just shoots right out and you got to catch them from across the room. So yeah, my baby A was out in 2 pushes. My baby B was out in 2 pushes. And my baby B probably would have held on to her feet and just rode that wave if we let him. But they were like, no, stop pushing. Give us a minute. Like they had to reset. But yeah, it was a wild, wild ride. And it was weirdly an uncomplicated delivery. But once they were out, then it got a little bit more complicated because now we had to fix me. So we had to get all the pieces of Humpty Dumpty back together again. And it took a minute. But, I think one of the big reasons of why I started Twiniversity is that this sounds crazy. And for you guys out there, this isn't to make you nervous. This is actually to make you hopeful. But it was really bad. Like I didn't name my own children. I didn't get to meet my kids for days. I was in ICU. It was bad, but I made it through and I did eventually get to see the kids. And sure, it wasn't the ideal delivery and truthfully, from the minute that I would say I was 16, I found that there was this birthing center by this deli that I worked at. And so I learned kind of a lot about the birthing process just by being right next door to them. And so I always had envisioned kind of this water birth and it being like super duper organic and just very natural. And when I found that second heartbeat, I threw my hands up, gave it to the doctors. But even though I did not have my water birth with Enya and patchouli scented candles, that doesn't mean that it wasn't a successful delivery. And, we say at Twiniversity, there is no birth plan. There's birth preferences. We could just prefer to have something one way versus another, but plans change. And so you have to be flexible and be willing to pivot. And for all of you that are expecting twinnies, I would say that there's only so many things that you're actually in control of. And so try to focus on those things that you're in control of, like your nutrition, your sanity, your stress level. There's so many things that you could do, but don't worry about where the babies are and who's head down and who's head up, because it's just not in your control. But what isn't in your control is how happy you are and how relaxed you are and what you're doing every night to get ready for the awesome experience that you're about to have. That's what you can do. So really take a deep breath. And even though your delivery may not go as planned, it's still going to be absolutely extraordinary.
I feel like there's power in that surrender too. Whereas for maybe singleton moms, right, there is an amount of surrender that can happen during pregnancy, but most of that I feel like does happen during labor. Like we've done our preparation and kind of like you talked about preferences, we call it a birth map, same idea, different ways to get to a really good outcome. But there are things that you can control and there's things that you can't control. And maybe that's such a benefit as a twin mom to hear that now, but to also know like you get to practice this surrendering for a nice long time before we're even talking about labor and that postpartum period, which I'm sure there's a lot of surrender once those babies are born too. So
it's really not just postpartum, Stephanie. It's the first 18 years. It's like literally, as parents, little kids, little problems, as we say. So it's just, you have to breathe into the things that are actually in your control. And like you said, just surrender to what you can't. There's only so much we could do.
Yeah. I also love just the support that your providers were giving you. Like, I absolutely love that she was like, your babies are blissfully unaware of that. Like, that touched me when you said that. I felt like I was there. And I was like, oh my gosh, that, like, understanding how powerful that is to a mother in labor. And then I assume, gathering a lot of strength from that. Like, okay, like that, like, perfect. And she's watching me so that I can focus on this and I don't have to worry about what's happening in there. Like, we're okay. That's pretty powerful. All right. I do have some more questions about kind of the pregnancy side of things. So You had mentioned earlier on that you may or may not have some more testing, some more appointments. I'd be curious to know what it looks like for twin moms when it comes to exercise and activity. I have a lot of moms who are very active. They want to remain active, safety wise and that kind of stuff. Can you speak to what it looks like to being pregnant with twins? And I guess I would be curious if what kind of twins you're pregnant with dictates or changes any of that, which I guess you had said, like the testing and stuff. Obviously, you're probably going to have a little bit more depending on what kind of pregnancy, but yeah.
Well, as far as your physical activity levels, there's literally nothing that you can't do unless your doctor specifically notices that there's an issue, right? So the thing is don't worry until somebody tells you to worry. So if you want to jog, if you want to swim, if you go to Pilates, there is no reason why you can't do anything unless there is an issue, right? So that whole don't worry until somebody tells you to worry. That's kind of the school of thought that I go on with a multiple birth pregnancy. And typically we have plenty of moms, like I genuinely have like CrossFit moms that go the distance and are still teaching classes, that are CrossFit teachers.
That's awesome.
That go up until that 38th weeks. So there's no reason of why you should limit your activity or anything unless there's an issue, right? Unless they're like, okay, well, we noticed some spotting, or we noticed that, when we did a stress test or something, that something was going on. But there's no reason to worry unless there's a reason to worry. As weird as that answer is, but there is no specific limitations just because you're carrying an additional baby.
Okay, that's good. I'm super glad that you said that out loud because I wasn't even totally sure, and so that makes me really happy to hear that. How about what mom should do when they're preparing for the birth of their twins? Like knowing you're going to have two, what are some preparations that are super useful for moms to start right now, whether that's preparing for postpartum or whatever? What does that look like for them?
So if they found out today and you found out in your 9 weeks pregnant, just relax. Don't prepare anything more than your relationship, because there is a storm that's coming that's going to be sleep deprivation, and it's going to be stuff, and it's not bad. And so when people say like, oh, you're going to be so exhausted, and we get a lot of pity as twin families. Everybody, like, as soon as they hear that we're having twins, they're like, oh my gosh, better you than me. I don't know how you're going to do it. Double trouble. And you just want to start screaming like, shut up. I don't want to hear any negativity. Like we don't need that. So for us, when I say that somebody just finds out that they're pregnant, just focus on drinking your water. Just focus on, you could Google stuff minimally. Don't Google problems. And I always say that Twiniversity is a safe space. Like the articles on our website, they skew positive. Yes, of course, there's going to be some things that aren't, all puppies and sunshine. But ultimately, we always know that there is some kind of resolution that is guaranteed kind of at the end of whatever that little journey is. But just take a deep breath, enjoy the silence, because you're not going to have a lot of it. Catch up on every single Netflix series that you ever wanted to watch. This is your time. Kick your feet up and chill. And also start thinking about, okay, let's get through our trimesters, right? The first trimester, I wouldn't start buying stuff because you don't even know what's out there. You might want to start doing your research, but certainly I wouldn't put deposits down on anything. I wouldn't pick a paint color for rooms. I would just chill and relax. And then during your second trimester, I would start looking at the stuff. And then, the thing is a lot of people tend to move with 20s or buy a new car. This is, I find, I don't know why. Why is everybody getting a Dutch? We don't need extra bedrooms. They could literally sleep, in beds, right? The cribs next to each other. You get too many cribs, you'd be fine. We don't need to move. I say try to not shake things up as much as possible if that's a realistic goal. But of course, if you live in a teeny tiny studio apartment, maybe you might want to just get a 1-bedroom, just throwing that out there. But don't start thinking about like giant changes on top of giant changes, because you may make hasty decisions. And so we've noticed that people have moved away from their family to get a bigger house when truthfully, they should have stayed close to home because that's where the hands were. They had more help there, and maybe you bought a newer car so that you could easily get to your 2 car seats. However, those car payments, could be a little suffocating. So don't make hasty decisions just because you found out that there's an additional heartbeat. And so the things that you should really focus on is say, okay, what are the things that we do eventually want to change? And what are the things that we definitely want to stay the same? And really take it slow. There is no rush to any of this. Just because you're having twins does not mean that you're going to deliver at 29 weeks. You have time. You have time to do things and really enjoy it and focus on those birth preferences. That's something you could research now. You could see what choices that your hospital has. Does your hospital have a midwife on staff that will stay with you the whole time? Does your hospital have a doula on staff? What type of birthing equipment does your hospital have? So for me, I say you could start making some phone calls. So we actually have like a twins delivery day workbook of everything that you could do and when. And we have, there's probably 80 questions to ask your health insurance company. And I only want you to call once. Just call once, because who wants to be on hold for 45 minutes 15 times? So gather all those questions that you want. Start looking for your pediatrician. I think that's another fun thing to do. And if you have time, there's no rush. You could interview a million people and then decide who's going to get the final rose, right? And so people would be like, I'm 12 weeks pregnant. Is it too soon to start looking for a pediatrician? No, that's something, just take your time, because you may have found the one. And then a few weeks later, you read in a Facebook group about this other person that's, a mile away from you, and you want to go visit them, and then you could change it up. So things like that, like little teeny tiny things, is what you could do in the beginning, and you build up to the bigger stuff. By week 30, though, I kind of put a hard stop on preparation. Like everything should be done by week 30. So at least the decisions need to be made. It's not that you need to have everything. And 30 weeks does not mean that you can, so the 30 weeks doesn't mean that you're going to be on bed rest, or it doesn't mean that something's going to happen. But I'm going to tell you, you will physically be fairly uncomfortable at 30 weeks with twinnies. And so you might have no medical limitations, but you do have limitations on your comfort level. And so if you could get things done, like even packing your hospital bag, like have that done by week 30, like installing your car seats. And really, please, guys, for those of you as a car seat tech, like you have to get them checked. And I know you're probably saying, no, we read the books, everything is good. Please, I beg you, go to safekids.org, find a tech in your area, and get your car seats inspected. As a tech, I will tell you, I have never, ever, I think 8 years I'm a tech, I have never had people come to me that actually had it all together, ever. So either they did like the shoulder belt and the latch, or my favorite was a guy who literally, God bless him, he was a gardener. He had a chainsaw in his trunk. That's a projectile. That's a chainsaw projectile. Can we just acknowledge that for a second? But it's always good to have a trained pair of eyes that is a non-judgmental pair of eyes. So anybody who's in the New York City area, if you get to the corner of Grand and Lafayette, I will do a car seat check for you for free. I do not even care. It's so important to me that people do that. But that's another thing that you could do in the very beginning, is at least find out who's going to be the person to do that. You could start looking for lactation consultants. And the other thing is Stephanie, I pray to God that you're talking a lot about this, but by law, they have to cover lactation. Your health insurance company has to cover lactation. And it is hysterical to me that families won't work with me because I'm not covered by insurance, but I have such a good success rate of getting reimbursement, because if you just go to healthcare.gov and you put in the word lactation, you will see that by law, our country requires every medical every healthcare company to provide lactation coverage for as long as the mom chooses to breastfeed. It's not 6 visits. It's not 6 months. It is literally, if you want to breastfeed for 15 years, that is nobody's business but your own. And if you need support through that, your healthcare has to cover that. So you could go to healthcare.gov, look that up, and be armed with the correct information, because insurance companies will be the death of me, but know exactly what you're getting. And interestingly, with multiple births, I will tell you, one of the weird little, like a little asterisk by breast pumps and getting your breast pump covered, is some insurance companies cover a breast pump per pregnancy, and some cover a pump per live birth. Bum, 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 meaning we get 2. So it's important to read the fine print on what your health provider and your health insurance company is actually going to give you, because we have heard it all, we've seen it all, and I am not just an advocate for a healthy birth, I am an advocate for a healthy parent. And if your insurance company is driving you crazy, throw it into one of our bulletin boards and we'll go dig deep, because odds are we have somebody in our group that works for that insurance company. I mean, we reach 1.4 million people a week. So we could find the needle in the haystack, and we fight. I'm constantly on a soapbox. That's it. But I'm fighting for our twin parents to make sure that they have a satisfying of an experience, that they, whatever that means to them. It's not my agenda. It's not a formula company. It's not a healthcare company. It is, my agenda is to make sure that every twin family out there feels whole and safe and heard, and they have the experience that they specifically want for them and their family.
Okay, now, Natalie, I have not been talking to people about this. I was unaware. So I will just straight up say that out loud. I was unaware that insurance is required to provide lactation. Now, when you're saying lactation, does that include if I go to an IBCLC over here, does it have to be someone within their specific network? Like, how does that work? And is it only on healthcare.gov, or if I have private insurance or my husband's work insurance, what is that? What does that look like?
So what healthcare.gov is kind of where the federal regulations are. And if you actually go to Twiniversity and you put in breastfeeding laws, we actually have a map that will take you to your state's breastfeeding laws. And so as a lactation person, I'm infuriated that I feel the world is trying to talk us out of trusting our baby and our bodies, right? I feel like everybody's like, oh, and I'm not anti-formula by any means. I'm super pro formula. And if you don't want to breastfeed, I'm down. If you're like, nope, dry this stuff up, I don't want to do it, that's cool by me. I will never judge you by any means. But if you want a certain type of experience, get it, girl. Come on, let's do this. So every state has their own set of breastfeeding laws. And those breastfeeding laws they're fascinating, first of all. Like, honestly, the year that when Doves Cry came out by Prince, I think it was like, I can't even remember the exact year. I just know that that's the year. That was the year that it became legal to breastfeed in public in New York. That was 10 seconds ago. Like, that wasn't even long ago. It was an act of public indecency. Please, Stephanie, that's my whole other breastfeeding law soapbox that I'd be on. But yes, they have to cover lactation care, and they could say we only cover people in network. However, if you can't find somebody in network, they still have to cover it.
Awesome.
That means that you get to choose who you want to be your lactation provider. And I will tell you, as a twin-specific lactation provider, not all lactation providers are created equal. I mean, my only problem with working with singletons is I get them to overproduce, and that makes me super nervous. So and it's just as bad to overproduce as it is to underproduce. So for me, I love finding families, and it's not only here in the United States. I actually work globally with families that are breastfeeding their twinnies. So it's crazy. And to see the laws like in Sweden and how breastfeeding is dealt with there, and even pregnancy is dealt with there versus here, it's just, we're pathetic sometimes. I have to say the United States is super pathetic when it comes to birth and caring for people that are creating the next generation. Hello, we're making the population. Why is everybody ignoring us? It just makes no sense to me. But with the lactation, even if they're like, hey, you have to go in network, and you're like, dude, I looked, I called 7 people. Nobody could help me. Nobody's going to be available during that time, or nobody has specific experience. Like maybe you had a mastectomy. We have moms who had cancer and froze their embryos and only have one working breast with tissue that's going to produce milk. You can't just see anybody. You have to go to somebody who's going to be super duper skilled. Like, there's always going to be an issue. And if you're not satisfied, you're allowed to see somebody else. And let's just say hypothetically that your insurance company says these are the people and you hated every single one of them. You could find somebody that makes you happy, just like your medical team. Like, you don't have to just accept the slop that's at the bottom of the bucket. Have the best experience, but you need to do the homework, unfortunately, for that. And you have to find those people. But I have a dedicated team member that does nothing but medical billing. And Natalie Diaz, paid for her to go take a billing course specifically on lactation, because I will be damned that people are not going to get the support that they need, especially if it's not in their finances. So yes, unfortunately, people do have to pay out of pocket for me, but I have a great reimbursement rate. And I am not inexpensive. So that's the other thing is that with all this experience, I remember in the very beginning that, I was charging like next to nothing and I was seeing so many people. It was a lot. But now I realize that I could balance it out and I could charge a lot to some families and charge nothing for others. So I'm Robin Hooding my lactation situation here in New York City, and it's working out beautifully. This is how I've been working for years. And I'm just a CLC, like for the record, even though I am pursuing my IBCLC, I'm not there yet, and we're still getting coverage. Even though there's some insurance companies that say they will never pay a CLC, they will only cover an IBCLC. That is not true. It's not true. So you have to fight, and I'm sorry that you have to, and it's a shame that that has to be something that gets added to your to-do list, but that's something that you could do in the beginning. So yeah, and you guys, if you need me, literally, community@twiniversity.com is how you find us. And anybody, even if you guys are having a singleton, if you're having trouble with your insurance company or your state, give us a buzz. Why not? Right? You always miss the shots you don't take. And for like Stephanie's classes and stuff, there's a lot of insurance companies that cover childbirth classes. So you may actually be able to get full reimbursement for Stephanie's virtual classes. So definitely you got to ask. If you don't ask, you're just going to be paying out of pocket for things. And I'm telling you, they don't lower the cost of colleges. That's historically not a thing that happens. And you may be having your baby next week, but you're going to still need money for education. And if not, use that money to go get a manicure and buy a fancy cup of coffee. You're paying for your insurance, so get everything that you possibly can, kids.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, just 100%. And yes, for those who are listening, things like childbirth education is definitely covered through insurance, like 90% of the time. So thank you for bringing that up as well. I want to end here since we're kind of like, we've brought it through the like pregnancy, birth, and we're almost to the postpartum. I just like curious what your best quick advice, because I know we're coming up on time here, but for moms who are coming home from the hospital and they've got these twins, what are your thoughts? What could you say to moms that are going to be coming up against that as your best advice for them for that postpartum period? And I know this is going to be summed up into like the tiniest amount of advice because I'm sure that is just hours of conversation. But what would you say to them?
There's an easy thing that people could do. Just focus on feeding. Don't worry about sleep. Don't worry about the dishes. Don't worry about anything else. Just focus on feeding, whether that's bottle feeding or breastfeeding or bottle feeding breast milk. It does not matter. And 100%, please introduce a bottle within the first month. So there's a lot I know that it's not a common practice, but with multiple births, you're going to need somebody to feed a baby. There will be a time that you will need to sleep more than an hour and 20 minutes. So we have to get those babies to accept a bottle, but focus on nothing but feeding every 3 hours, 24 hours a day, unless a doctor tells you different. That is the only thing you worry about. You outsource everything else.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Natalie. Before we go, will you tell everybody, talk about Twiniversity just for a moment, if you would, because I'm even interested, but I know that the listeners are also going to want to know, and where everyone can find you, all of your social media, your website, all of that stuff.
Yeah, so we're just at twiniversity.com, which was, I think, one of my biggest exciting successes is that wasn't a word that existed. And now ALEXA knows what that word means. So yeah, so we're twiniversity.com. And then we also, I wrote 2 books, What to Do When You're Having Two and the Newborn Twin Sleep Guide. I stay in our twin parenting lane is where we are. We also have a really outstanding podcast. We're the only people in the App Store that specifically make an app for tracking everything from contractions to feeding specifically for twins that I invest way too much money in, by the way. And I don't know why it's like I'm hemorrhaging money into this app, but I want to build a better mousetrap for you guys. And we're everywhere. I mean, we have separate Facebook groups that are just exclusively for twin pregnancy that we do have a moderator there. I'm not going to say that she's there 24 hours a day, but we have babysitters for all of our groups. So they're not spammy. We barely advertise, even talking about ourselves, but where you could find me most is just like Stephanie. I am an educator, but it's not just exclusively childbirth. It's really about the whole preparation process. So it is that what to do when you're having two. So we have a expecting twins class. We have a twins plus singletons class. So for those people that already have one and now are wondering how twins are going to be different, we have a baby safety course that we put together during the pandemic because we realized that, hospitals were really slacking when it came to first aid training, but it's also car seat and baby proofing. And then we have our twins breastfeeding class. And every single month, every second Tuesday of the month at 1:30, we have a membership meeting that's led by myself and one of my besties who's also a CLC, a sleep coach specifically for twins. So there's a lot of different resources that we have for you guys in addition to all of our socials. But if you need us, just Google Natalie Twins. Honestly, you're going to find me. We work so hard on making sure that you're going to find us at 2:00 in the morning because we want you to sleep. We don't want you to start going down a Google rabbit hole. So we're really, really happy to support you with whatever the heck you think you need. Allow us the opportunity to help you, please.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Natalie. This has been an awesome conversation, and I'm so excited you were able to join me today.
Me too. Thank you, Stephanie.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.